Good evening and welcome to 31 Horror Nights 2021. It's October 1st and tonight's movie is Host. There will not be nearly as many found footage films as there were last year, not even close. But I really was interested in this movie because it is a found footage movie with a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes with I think 90 reviews. That's almost unheard of. Actually, scratch the almost. I think it is unheard of. This might be the most critically acclaimed found footage movie ever by that barometer. Host is a UK movie from 2020, and sort of like how Unfriended was a Skype movie, this is a Zoom movie because it was 2020. It seems kind of similar in format, but instead of a group of kids getting haunted by a girl that they cyberbullied to death, it's a bunch of grown adults summoning a ghost or doing a seance over Zoom, which I have no idea why you would ever want to do that. This film is also uncommonly short. It's less than an hour long. The trailer looks pretty good. There was one idea that I really liked where they use a filter, but instead of focusing on a person, it was focusing on what looks like nothing. So sort of implying that there is something that the human eye can't see, but the camera can. I mean, critical consensus tells me that I'm going to like this movie, so I'm going to go check it out. This year's Horror Nights is starting out on a good note. I'm going to give Host an 8 out of 10. It's nothing spectacular, but it's a very solid movie. Apparently, either almost all of it or all of this movie was done remotely. None of the actors left their houses for it. I believe that the actors even had to do their own effects for things that were taking place in their houses. So that's very interesting and certainly makes this movie remarkable, if nothing else, for that. But as a horror movie just on its own, it's still pretty good. It's kind of hard to watch this movie without drawing some comparisons to Unfriended, and overall I do think that Unfriended was a little bit better, but still, again, this was done well. The main character is a group of, I think 5, maybe 4 women, and the thing is that I was expecting, because it starts out with one of their houses, Haley, where she was starting the Zoom call and setting up her camera, and there's some paranormal activity happening. There's, of course, the obligatory, we thought it was this, but really it's something mundane and explainable. But there was one thing that wasn't. And I was thinking, okay, so are they doing this seance to try to figure out what's going on at her apartment? Or it's British, so I guess her flat. And that never comes up again. I'm pretty sure they never once actually, in a straight line, explain why they are doing this seance. And that, I think, is a bit of an oversight, considering how bad things turn out for everybody involved. There was a thing, some of them not taking it seriously, so I guess that they're doing this for fun, but whose idea of fun is this? One thing about Host that could either be a good or bad thing depending on how you look at it is that when it comes to horror, this movie is very efficient. The first part of this movie is very slow and honestly I thought kind of boring. I thought that 30 minutes had gone by and only 10 minutes have passed. That's definitely one of the downsides, how long it takes to get started, because I wasn't really interested. But throughout that, they introduce a few little things, and everything that was super pointless for them to bring up, that wasn't just conversation between the characters, comes back later in the movie. I think that would be more of a good thing than a bad thing, because that means that just the stuff that you thought was just random stuff, people living their lives, just talking with each other, is stuff that becomes important throughout the runtime. There really isn't much to the characters. Given how short this movie, you don't really have time to get to know them very well. And what I did get from them, honestly, didn't make them seem the most likable. They are the kind of people that will talk crap behind each other's backs. But that's just all the first part. Once we start getting into the horror, that's where this movie starts to really come into its own. A lot of the scares are so clever that it's kind of cheapened a little bit by the fact that the way that they were done, they didn't have to be jump scares, but most of the time they were, to some extent. I don't think I can go into detail about what a lot of the scares were without going into spoilers, but there were a few very creative moments in this movie. A lot of the problems I really think boiled down to the fact that this movie is too short. With Unfriended, they had the space to develop the characters a little bit more, create a little bit more atmosphere, and create a long build-up. Host is more of a no frills, what you see is what you get kind of thing. It is impressive in the way that they made it, and it is interesting because Zoom was such a big part of a lot of people's lives last year and this year too, so it was funny seeing something that people use every day in this context, in like a horror movie. If you liked Unfriended, or even didn't like Unfriended because the characters were too horrible, maybe check this out. And with that, let's go to spoilers. One thing that they said multiple times in the build-up to the seance is that you gotta treat this with respect, because this is serious business, and if you goof around, you could be inviting bad things into your life. And of course, one of the characters decides to, like, play a little joke, pull a prank. She was, like, faking, like, oh, I hear a name, Jack, and she made up this story about this kid in her elementary school who died, and she was hearing him, and it was all fake. There was a moment where, like, a medium, spiritualist, whoever, like, got disconnected, and then she was, like, laughing. It's like, oh, I made all that up, and everybody, some of them were just like, oh, you suck, I was scared for you. Other ones sort of laughed with her. But apparently, and we've kind of seen stuff like this, it's when you, like, make something up, it sort of opens the door and allows things to come in. They described it, they made the comparison of, like, creating a scary mask and, like, just asking any scary creature to come in, put it on, and then mess with you. There were a couple of very subtle things, like they all had a candle in front of them. Like, at the beginning, there were, like, all the women and one guy. But he got, like, distracted by, like, his girlfriend, and, like, the candle blew out, and I immediately thought, okay, he's dead, because the candle went out. But there was a point where Gemma, the woman who did the prank, her candle blew out all on its own, and when she came back and she saw that the candle was out, she didn't even acknowledge it, she just lit it again. But then things really start to get dicey. A lot of them have alcohol with them. One of the wine glasses, like, explodes by itself. But I think the first real scare of this movie is when Haley's chair that she's sitting on gets, like, violently pulled back while she's on it. I think my favorite scare in the movie was one that involved one of the characters created, like, a Zoom background that was just, like a minute-long loop of recording her bedroom and her walking in and just farting around doing whatever in her room. And it was like, oh, I created a new friend to hang out with me. I thought, wow, that's weird. Who does that? But it does come back because that woman got disconnected from the call. And then she came back, and then you see her walking in. And they were like, what's going on? What happened to you? What happened to you? And she's not doing anything. They went, oh, wait, no, this isn't her. This is that video of her. And then they used that opportunity to, like, have her face, like, break through the video. And it looks like her face gets, like, violently slammed against the camera. One of the other things that I liked is that one of them hears stuff going on in her house, and she goes out. And this is where I was talking about the filter was trying to put a face on what looked like nothing. And what she did was that she took flour and, like, dumped it on the spot where it was, and you see footprints form in the flour. And later in that scene, you see footprints of flour enter another room. And at the very end, she's, like, hiding in her room, and she senses someone come in, and she throws the blanket, and it rests on a humanoid figure. One by one, everybody goes down, everybody dies. And I think that the last one remaining is the one who did the prank and ruined it for everybody else. And there was one thing I liked where where it was like all of the cameras were on. I think there were 5 of them at that point, and they started turning off one by one, and it went like 5, 4, like in like a pretty steady rhythm. And then once it hit 1, that's when something happened to the remaining woman. The final scare I thought was kind of weak. One of them has like a Polaroid camera and like is taking pictures with it. And there was a thing where it was like, I see something in the room behind me in this dark room. And Haley and Gemma, the last 2 survivors, she's taking pictures and there's a little flash. And immediately I was like, okay, in the split second of the flash, you're going to see something scary. And she keeps taking pictures and nothing happens. But then right before I think the 5th one, the camera like zooms in and I was like, okay. And that was the last scare of the movie. I really think they could have done something a lot more subtle with it. Where, like, instead of, because it was like a big scary zombie face or whatever, they could have done just like a black figure and like not have it be super loud, or just have like maybe someone gasp and drop the camera and then the movie just cuts out. Comparing this to Unfriended again, what I liked the most about Unfriended was that it starts out as just like a bunch of characters and they seem normal and it seems they're just having a Skype call. But as the movie goes on and as these hauntings continue, you learn more and more about them. You learn that they're all horrible people, and it doesn't make you happy to see them die, but it sort of creates like a new paradigm with how you view these characters. And when they get eliminated one by the ghost, it creates a different sort of tension. But with this one, it's like, I don't really know anything about any of these people. Like, if anything, the only one that should have died was the one that did the prank, because everybody else was totally like taking it seriously. Well, the guy wasn't, but it's like most of them seemed completely innocent in this regard. I guess it's kind of pick your poison. Would you rather have unlikable characters die or boring characters die? Overall, Host was a pretty good movie. I mean, it's less than an hour long, so if you want to see it, it's not exactly going to eat up a lot of time. And while there are some problems I have with it, the good things about it far outweigh the bad. And with that, Horror Nights 2021 begins in full swing. I'll see y'all tomorrow.